Hello, I'm Ian Matthews, and I'm a PhD student at the University of Vigo. Back in October last year, I had the fortunate opportunity to present some of my work at the GenderCom conference at the University of Cardiff, specifically looking at the notion of abject AI in the language of female robots in science fiction, an adjunct from my PhD focus of AI in the character of Joy in Blade Runner 2049. I discussed the nature of how women in cinema, if presented within an othered, i.e., non traditional form, are in most cases positioned in ways that can be seen as discredited, disowned, and often annihilated. Robin Wood, 1979. This quote is a powerful claim, but certainly helps to explain societal concerns of those happy to transgress against traditional standards. I specifically looked to the case of David Cronenberg's 1979 film The Brood in order to highlight this, a nuanced example of a sci-fi adjacent horror that looks at its main monstrous female character in a more forgiving light. I followed with a discussion of films from across genres that could be perceivably seen to be doing something similar. With many contributors taking part, we considered work ranging from Whatever Happened to Baby Jane to Carrie, from Bridesmaids to Barbie, the overall work of Almodovar and Lynch as well. As we did so, the group pretty much uniformly was happy to think that the future was far brighter for the portrayal of women in film. Sci-fi in particular came in for praise as through a consideration of texts whereby we might not see some of the tropes I discuss with my own female agency scheme I've been working on. There are fewer examples of poor choices being made. Perhaps that's the smartest way to put it. That doesn't mean that there aren't problems, but overall, in the past 5 to 10 years, we've started to see that representation of women is a far more nuanced and delicately presented concern. But saying that, however, the thing was, as we advanced through the conversation, someone suddenly realised, hang on, how many of these have been directed by women? Or written, produced? And it got me to thinking, as much as I was convinced that I knew that there were examples, I just couldn't recall them immediately. And that surprised me. As such, I thought I therefore should make a particular effort to consider films that might have a female positive message that came signed off by someone of that sex. I mean, it's all well and good to have a male director, writer, and such attempt to consider female agency. I mean, I get the intrinsic contradiction in terms of what I'm doing after all. I thought, yeah, as a side concern to my PhD's overarching literature review and what I imagine will form a decent part of my rationale within my concluding recommendations, here's a by no means comprehensive list of some of the created by women sci-fi films that I think you should all seek out and watch. Aniara, 2018. The film I was desperately trying to remember during the conversation at the conference. Aniara shows that despite everything we might try to protect ourselves from in the future, there is no protection against humanity. Paraphrased from a poem by Nobel Prize winner Harry Martinson, and on whose work this film is based, the film's central conceit is to contemplate how far we will go to seek solace in an existentially bereft place. Nominally about a Mars colony ship knocked off course as it attempts to take passengers away from a wrecked Earth. The title itself, possibly referring to the ancient Greek for sad or despairing, is invoked due to the work of the ship's female protagonist and her duties maintaining the ship's Mima system, a type of immersive VR machine that can provide experiences of old Earth. Initially designed as a way for colonists to occasionally seek refuge once they arrived on Mars, it becomes the sole and effectively futile point of happiness from the seemingly doomed crew. Peleg Hageman's direction evokes other texts such as Solaris and Silent Running, but with a far greater level of empathy, perspective, and insight for its female characters, the plight of Mima Hader, the main character, in particular being especially compelling. And if this sounds interesting, in a similar vein, I would also definitely recommend High Life, Claire Denis' treatise on artificiality, memory, and again, empathy, in a manner similar to Aniara, but with added craziness from Juliette Binoche. And if the first two films I mentioned seem to suggest that women in sci-fi need only to be about introspection, Titan is a far more visceral and tactile experience that I felt was telling me how the female body feels. Taking in sexual pleasure, objectification, co-option, pain, subjugation, disguise, misinterpretation, pride, it is both a hellacious Cronenbergian experience of a film and, from certain perspectives, also a moving story about broken parent-child bonds. It's definitely not a film for the faint-hearted, with some particularly grotesque imaginings. For me, it certainly deserved its Palme d'Or for the concepts it was attempting to discuss. Julie Kernauer's previous film, Raw, also talks about family bonds, about sisterly love and rivalry, acceptance and expectation at its core. It's also a film about cannibalism. But this goes to show, good sci-fi and horror are never really about the blood or the gore, they're mainly about the feelings and fears that these terrors represent. Accordingly, whereas many films in the genre are about female fears, documented quite brilliantly in Carol Clover's work, Men, Women and Chainsaws being a particularly good read, there are also so few female workers in the field as the whole, you know? So that's why I'm particularly glad of de Kernau's work, complicated though it may be. And there are others that I would speak on. I'd talk about Censor, I'd talk about Don't Worry Darling, but one of the most interesting, if divisive, takes on female agency, or Things, that had to be something I just have to mention. Now, many of you are possibly aware the film won Emma Stone this year's Oscar for Best Actress. Had it won Best Film, however, as producer, she would have been the one picking up the award. And that would have been totally fair. Her relationship with the film is all over its creation. Her influence on writing, direction, and very specific choice of acting for the role of Bella Baxter, it goes far beyond that of a muse or simple actor for director-writer Yorgos Lanthimos. Therefore, from an industrial perspective at the very least, I believe that this is an important sci-fi text. And there are, of course, many more I could refer to. Strange Days, Technoblast, Bird Box, Long Walk, St. Maud, Neptune Frost, all have cases to be made for against inclusion on any list. But I hope that by referring to that which I have, we can see the damsel in distress role need not be the sole one for women in the genre any longer.